What is up, everybody? Episode number 44. Got the double fours of the Big Five Pod. I'm, of course, your co-host, Kyle Morello. Next to me, Jake Copestick. Cope, we took the midweek off. Wasn't really a lot going on. We had to wait for some things to happen, and some things have happened. We're going to talk about it, but it's been a while. How you been?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm not sore anymore from Sunday, which is nice.
Good.
Not feeling that anymore. But yeah, I feel good. Yeah, we really didn't have anything to talk. We really didn't have anything to talk about Sunday going into Monday. So we actually have some stuff. We finally got an update on Hunter Dickinson. It unfortunately wasn't the news we were looking for, but we finally have an update. That was like the one thing I was like, hey, maybe we can talk about that Sunday going into Monday. But foolish of me to think that a decision would come out because it took forever. But here we are. We finally have a decision on that. We got some other stuff to talk about too.
Yeah. I mean, hey, that's the first thing we got in our ledger here. So why don't we get right into it? The moment we've all been waiting for. Hunter Dickinson has committed to, drum roll please, the University of Kansas. Kansas University. Whatever you want to call it. He's a Jayhawk. Um, it's unfortunate. We came on here last week saying that there was some, or I don't even know if we talked about it last week about some crystal ball predictions we saw, but on Twitter we mentioned that there was a crystal ball prediction that had Hunter Dickinson going to Villanova. It seemed like he had a really, really good visit on April 28th. That was last Friday at Villanova. And it seemed like some momentum was maybe building. Now, we did mention on our Twitter that, he has kept things close to the vest. He hasn't really said a lot unless he was on a Barstool podcast, but he wasn't this past week. Obviously, he was a little busy. So we really didn't know, but he is going to Kansas. Listen, we talked about him potentially making Nova a Final Four team. Kansas is a Final Four team caliber team now with him on the roster. But it's sad nonetheless. I think people were really hoping and expecting him to maybe come to the main line, and he did not do that. So, Cope, what can you tell me about this decision? What do you think led him to pick the Jayhawks over the Wildcats and others?
So first and foremost, obviously, like you play for a Hall of Fame coach in Bill Self. You play in what people thought was the best conference. No, I thought that the best conference, at least regular season conference, tournament wise, was the Big 12. And here's what I think the ultimate deal breaker is here. You look at some of the schools that are, we're looking at them. Mark Armstrong right now is currently slated to be Villanova's starting point guard. He showed flashes of being very good last year, but as all their freshmen, they had to learn on the fly here. They were going to have growing pains. That just comes with playing as a young player. You look at Maryland. Jameer Young's there, who played with Hunter Dickinson, but the the thing for me that separated Kansas from everybody else, they have an awesome point guard in DeJuan Harris who plays both sides of the ball, who doesn't turn the ball over, who's terrific in the pick and roll. That's going to be a nightmare pick and roll to defend the guys big as Hunter Dickinson, and also a guy like DeJuan Harris who can make the right pass, who's not going to turn the ball over, who can score on his own, and just as a very very high IQ and a high field player. Had an assist to turnover ratio of 3-1 or about that. It's to me it was all that good stuff. Great conference, a powerhouse like Kansas, probably a shit ton of NIL money, great facilities, and you get to play with one of the best point guards in the country that's going to be feeding you the ball. And you look at the point guards that Hunter Dickinson's had. They brought in Jalen Llewellyn from Princeton, who got hurt, so it was the 5'9" freshman Doug McDaniel who had to step in for Michigan. A couple years ago, they had Mike Smith from Columbia. So and then they had Devontae Jones. It was Juwan Howard bringing in transfers every year, and there was a different guy that was feeding him the ball. So he's gonna have a guy in DeJuan Harris who's been there, who's won a championship at Kansas. To me, like that's what the deal breaker is. You have one of the best point guards, one of the best two-way players in college basketball, one of the smartest players in college basketball, and DeJuan Harris. That's who's going to be feeding you the ball. You look at the rest of the team they brought in. They have Nick Timberlake from Towson, who's a sharpshooter with a lot of experience. Arterio Morris, who was a former top recruit, comes in from Texas. KJ Adams is still there, who gives them the ability when he's off the floor. Kansas can play small like they did last year when he was the starting center. So it's a really good team with a very good point guard and DeJuan Harris is going to be feeding Hunter Dickinson the ball. I think that's ultimately what the deal breaker was, besides all the glitz and glamour, all the other good stuff that Kansas had to offer.
Yeah, and no disrespect to Michigan and Javon Howard either, but like you mentioned, Hall of Fame head coach. I mean, he's won 2 titles now. He has consistently put out good products into the NBA, consistently had teams go far in the tournament. Um, say what you want about Bill Self, but he is one of the greatest coaches of our generation, and of all time, maybe in college basketball too. I don't know exactly where I'd rank him, but he's up there. He's definitely earned that. So really hard to pass that up. I mean, obviously Kyle Neptune going into his sophomore year as a head coach, maybe not as attractive as someone like Bill Self. Even Calipari, I think, Bill Self is definitely over him too. So yeah, I listen, as much as I would have loved him to go to Nova, this is the right decision for him. Objectively, out of all the teams that he visited, this is the right decision for him. And they're in a really good spot to potentially win a national championship next year. So good for Hunter Dickinson, good for Kansas, bad for Nova, but they're still going to be active. They still have to find a backup big too, to go behind Eric Dixon now. So we'll see what happens on that front. But now that Hunter Dickinson's out of the transfer portal, the talent there is obviously, gotten thinner. He's kind of like the best transfer ever. We've talked about that multiple times. But someone who is still a really, really talented person in the transfer portal is Penn's Jordan Dingle. Obviously, we know and love Jordan Dingle, Ivy League Player of the Year. He's now been in the transfer portal for about a week, and it sounds like someone from the Big East is after him, but it's not Villanova. Get that out of your heads right now. It's Rick Pitino. It's St. John's trying to get him to go to Queens. They're after it's seemingly everybody in the transfer portal, but this is someone who could really, really be a big get for Rick Pitino. Do you think this is, a good fit for him? Do you think this is something that's going to happen? What are your thoughts on Jordan Dingle and St. John's potentially uniting in Queens?
Yeah, I think this is a great fit, and something that's interesting that I tweeted from our account today, and I tweeted a little snippet from a press conference. So these Penn played Iona with Pitino last year, and Dingle came off his high ankle sprain. He was 100% for that game, but afterwards, Rick Pitino is like he's unequivocally an NBA player. Still had some high praise for him, even though he didn't have a great game with him being hobbled coming out of the boot. He's getting pressed. They're hardly letting him catch. Like they made life difficult on him, and he's still a lot of praise for this guy. And I'm still waiting for uh, a big splash here. Like Rick Pitino's brought in a lot of really, really solid guys. He brought in a couple of his Iona guys. He's got Dennis Jenkins, who I think will be competitive in the Big East. Cruz Davis, still a young player, but who Pitino lauded at Iona. He brought in Quinn Slazinski, who spent a lot of last season hurt, but started his career at Louisville, which is funny that he didn't start his career with Rick Pitino, but he's been at every school kind of he hasn't been following him. Brings in Glenn Taylor from Oregon State, who he just brought in. He actually just got Brady Dunlap to commit there as well, who Nova just had on
Saw that
campus.
too, yes.
So yeah, Brady Dunlap's in there. He got Naeem Aline from UConn. Joel Soriano was awesome last year, led D1 in double doubles, I believe, and he's still there. So it's a very solid team, but I'm still waiting for a big splash. I thought Walter Clayton was going to be that big splash. He ended up going to Florida to play for Todd Golden and went home. This guy would be your big splash because he's obviously like scoring prowess is what they need right now. It's a very good, it's a very solid squad what he's got, but he needs a bucket, he needs a big time scorer. And when you can add the second guy in D1 last year, that absolutely fits the bill. But not only is he going to go there, and he's from Valley Streams, from not far from St. John's, but to put a guy like Jordan Dingle in that lineup, he's able to score. He's going to have the good thing is he's going to have ball handlers around him. He's going to have a Dennis Jenkins or a Cruz Davis around him to help handle the ball. He's more of a not that he can't handle it. He's more. Let's be honest. He's a shooting guard by trade. He's way better when he's asked to score and not really facilitate and just get his own. So he would fit exactly what Rick Pitino's looking for. He'd give him a big scoring splash here. And if you want to go to the draft, you want to have you want to play at the next level. There is nobody, Kyle. There is nobody better in Division I to play for that will develop you individually, that will spend time with you and develop you as an individual player and do all the individual skill work necessary to work on your weaknesses and get you to the next level, and Rick Pitino. you need a big time player, a big time scorer, and you want to go to a guy that's going to develop you for the next level. Home run, if you ask me, if this reunion happens, and from what it sounds like St. John's is the leader in the house right now for Jordan Dingle.
Yeah, honestly, like I haven't really heard any other names like as there for him as St. John's has. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned when Rick Pitino first got hired by St. John's that they could probably be a tournament team next year already, just for him being there and just for the people he's going to bring in. And then you obviously, you mentioned some of the people he has brought in, Joel Soriano still being there. And could you imagine that pick and roll with Jordan Dingle and Joel Soriano? I mean, come on now. That's something serious. And even
Yeah.
just besides that, it takes the pressure off Soriano too, because he had to be, the scorer for them last year too, and also the rebounder and everything else. But Jordan Dingle being there takes the pressure off him too. It's a great 1-2 punch. Maybe one of the better ones in the Big East.
Oh yeah.
I could definitely see them being a tournament team next year if they get Jordan Dingle. Maybe even already, but I think Jordan Dingle would solidify that.
Yeah.
So
And they're not
obviously,
done. They got a couple scholarships open. I don't think they're
yeah.
done yet.
Oh
Still
my
bringing
God, they
guys
do.
in.
They
They
do.
still. I think if they get Mackenzie McBacko from Jersey, who decommitted from Duke when Filipowski announced he was coming back,
Yeah,
when he was coming back, I think that would be the highest rated recruit in the history of St. John's, and that would
just
be
saying something.
dynamite if he could add 2 top 100 guys for this year.
Yeah.
So he's not done. I'm
No.
just saying. I told you this is my favorite hire of the offseason. The guy's a top 5 coach in the sport, even though he was at Iona the last couple of years. He's going to build a monster here before he retires.
Yeah.
He's going to set him up for the future and build a monster, and you're already seeing that now. And Jordan Dingle would be the icing on the cake for this cycle here.
It would be really, really, really good for them. I think that goes without saying, but wow, it would be very exciting stuff. And it would just make Big East and college basketball more exciting too. Not that it needs it, but like there's a few of those teams like around sports where you can say like when that team is good, it's so much better for the league. Like for example, and this is maybe a little bit biased, but I don't think so. When the New York Knicks are good, it's better for the NBA. They're an iconic franchise. When the Green Bay Packers are good, it's good for the NFL. They're an iconic franchise. When St. John's is good, it's good for college basketball. Because you talk about the old Big East, Chris Mullin there, and them going back and forth with Georgetown and Syracuse and the 80s and 90s and all that. Like that's one of the, and they play Madison Square Garden too a lot. So like St. John's being back would be huge for college basketball, especially being in New York, which is a hotbed for college basketball. So yeah, give me Jordan Dingle to Rick Pitino and St. John's. That would be incredible, and we'll keep you updated if that officially happens too. So yeah, moving on now. We got some Temple news, which is always a good thing, especially when they actually have someone coming into the program instead of leaving. Quante Berry, former Providence guard, committed to Temple, and they have Georgetown's Jordan Riley in for a visit too. So 2 former Big East guys looking to come to Temple. One already committed. This is being recorded on Thursday. Happy May 4th, by the way. May the 4th be with you. But yes, Quante Berry committed today, the day we're recording. It's funny, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but when all the Temple coaching staffs post like a GIF or a picture or something like they did with Matteo Piccarelli, now they did it with Quante Berry, which is like people eating berries and stuff. I thought that was very funny, and it seems like the staff's getting people excited a little bit. But anyway, you can talk a little bit more about Quante Berry, but for Jordan Riley, he's going to visit on Saturday. 6'4" guard from New York. Played last 2 years at Georgetown. Was offered by Temple coming out of high school. Hasn't been like a crazy contributor for Georgetown. Around 5 points, around 3 rebounds per game. Started 9 games last year. Not really a big 3-point shot type of player. 19% last year. Only 1 attempt per game though, so not too bad. But what can you tell me about Quante Berry, and then a little bit too about Jordan Riley's prospects potentially coming to North Broad?
So yeah, we talked about Quante Berry when I believe he set up a visit. This before he got on campus. He just did it this week. He did, or last week. He was just on campus recently. But he's a bigger guy who's going to have 4 years of eligibility. Redshirted last year at Providence. And look, as a guy who can handle the ball and can get downhill and get in the paint and pick out the shooters, that's going to work here for Adam Fisher's system surrounding. You got to get paint touches. Got to kick that ball out. and you got to get open threes. And Quante Berry's going to help you out with that. He'll probably play behind Icy Miller. Obviously, he's a shoe-in for the starter. Have to imagine he'll probably, be a bench ball handler for the moment. Certainly, got you can develop versus behind a high Icy Miller, who's now going to be a junior. So you have a young guy in the pipeline now who can be a ball handler for you. And nice to see them get another commitment and start to string some together here. As far as Jordan Riley goes, yeah, maybe not a 3-point shooter, but we need some defense here. We need some athletes. We need some size. Because as much as the 3-point shooting is great, gotta play defense. You gotta have some. If you're gonna have guys that just shoot the ball, have a little bit of variation, have some pop, some athleticism on the wing, which should be huge. The thing I love most about this, we were both at the press conference, and what did Adam Fisher say? He was so adamant we have to get guys on campus. We have to bring people here and show them how cool our campus is, and they're doing that, and it looks like it's becoming pretty successful so far. So nice to see them get Quante Berry. Hopefully they can get a guy like Jordan Riley, who coming out of high school was a top 5. I think he was top 2. I think he was the second guy, according to 24/7, was the number 2 guard in New York. So, although he's gone to Georgetown, he's kind of played seldom, unfortunately, for 2 really bad teams. Still a guy that came out with a lot of pedigree in high school, and that Temple was after for sure. So good prospect here for Jordan Riley to bring in. We are getting late in the process here, so I just think it's good that they're bringing anybody at this point. Hard to beat. Look, there's still a ton of names in the portal. There still is a ton, but they got off to a late start here with the late hire. I think we just got to start bringing guys in here. I don't think this is bad when you can get a guy coming in from the Big East to transfer down and play for a school that previously offered him. I don't think that's a bad idea. So hopefully they can just start bringing guys in. You're going to need some size. Shout out to Javon Edmonds, still doing really good coverage of Temple hoops in the offseason. Said he caught up with Chris Clark, and Chris Clark said, we didn't forget about the bigs, which is good because they were after Russell Chiwa, and he committed to Georgia, so they don't have him. Quante Berry, Jordan Riley, these guys are like 6'3", 6'4", so they're going to need some size eventually. But why don't we get the guards shored up? It's starting to look like that too. You have Shane Dezzoni and Heisman Miller and Piccarelli. Jaleel White's coming back. Now we have Quante Berry here. Like, we're starting to shore together the guards, but we need some forwards. We need some size. We need some bigs. So I think if you can get a Jordan Riley, that's where your next phase comes in. Is okay. Let's get some size, maybe some floor space or some shot blocking, and let's start to build out that way. But they got a commitment from Quante Berry. Hopefully we can get one from Jordan Riley now that he's going to be on campus in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, listen, to your point about just bringing guys in, like, these are 2 guys who are obviously talented coming out of high school because they committed to playing the Big East, Providence and Georgetown. I mean, those are big time basketball schools. So, you get a guy like Quante Berry, redshirted. He's going to have a lot of eligibility left. Hopefully, he uses it all at Temple and doesn't go somewhere else. But that's on Adam Fisher and company to make sure he stays. But we'll see how that fit is too. I think it's going to be a good fit, like you mentioned. And then with Jordan Miller, like another guy who out of high school committed to Georgetown. He was that good, and maybe didn't fit there. Maybe wasn't being developed right by an obviously not great coaching staff. No offense, Patrick Ewing, but they just weren't good. Like it's just unfortunate. And they had some okay players. Like they've had some guys transfer out this year and go to still maintain big time D1 status here. But bringing in talented guys is part of the process, because if it's the right coaching staff, which I think this coaching staff can be, they can develop those guys, maybe like Georgetown didn't, or maybe like Providence didn't with, Quante Berry. And he didn't play, so that's not really, we didn't really see what he was on the court yet. But like you said, it's just all about bringing in people. It's especially with the amount of talent that left this year that Temple had last year. You just need guys to fill the roster spots, and you'll see what happens, and hopefully those guys can then attract further guys when they see Adam Fisher's coaching style and what the vibes are on campus. So it's a good thing. Hopefully Jordan Miller makes that another commitment from a former Big East player, and they start to fill up some scholarships here. Speaking of one person that they did try to bring in and fill up a scholarship with, Will Johnston, UT Rio Grande Valley transfer portal entrant. I don't know if that's a word, but we're going to go with it. Temple was in his top 3. It was Temple, Oregon State, and Loyola Marymount, and he ended up going to Loyola Marymount. Was a guard from Australia, played every game for Rio Grande Valley this year, averaged almost 15 points a game for them. Still has 2 more years of eligibility. So That's a pretty good guy for Marymount. I mean, obviously, they're in a not extremely tough conference, but a very top-heavy conference, I would say. Well, what can you tell me about this decision for Will Johnson picking Loyola Marymount over Temple and Oregon State?
So look, the thing is, Loyola Marymount didn't have a bad year last year. 19-12 overall, 9-7 in the conference. They won at Gonzaga. They beat St. Mary's. Not not as far as anyone's concerned. That's probably as good a season as you could have. Beating both those guys when they were ranked and having to go to Gonzaga and beat them at the kennel. So it's not a bad program. Understand Johnson. They are losing some shooting. They're losing Cam Shelton. They're losing Dustin Arns, who came there from Ohio State. So they are going to need some 3-point shooting, which is what Will Johnson is, of course, going to bring you, and which is why I would have liked to see him at Temple, because a guy that shoots that well on that many attempts from three, that fits exactly what Adam Fisher was talking about in his press conference. And those type of players want to bring that type of shooting prowess in. So shame he didn't commit to Temple. Would have been another Matteo Piccarelli, another sharpshooter, but he'll go to Loyola Marymount. Stan Johnson had him playing very, very well. They're losing shooting. He's going to fit that bill and slide in to be able to fill that role for him. So good get for him to go to the WCC. Shame he didn't come to Temple, because him and Piccarelli on the same floor, on the floor at the same time. I mean, you would have been able to probably drive a Mack truck through the lane. You would have had to respect them. You would have had to play out like that. So would have been nice to give him another shooter. Unfortunately, he'll be literally going to almost as far away as you possibly can go, 3,000 miles away to Loyola Marymount. But yeah, good luck there. Did his postgrad year at the Perky Yeoman School. Crazy, this guy is from Australia, and then he ended up doing his postgrad year 20 minutes from where I live. So it's very cool. But yeah, they're really would have been nice to have that shooting and to have another ball handler who can shoot like that. But that's how the portal is sometimes, man. That's how it is. I'm sure you get to Loyola Marymount and you're in LA and it's really nice. Sure, it's not exactly a hard sell there for LMU.
No, definitely not. And I mean, they're playing in a conference with Gonzaga and St. Mary's too, who are perennial tournament teams. Obviously, Gonzaga being a perennial top 10 team, top 5 team in the country. It was good. I mean, I agree. I wish Will Johnson would have went to Temple. Great 3-point shooter. But best of luck to him at Loyola Marymount. Go beat Gonzaga. Go beat St. Mary's. Do your thing, and hopefully we don't see you in tournament. Assuming Temple makes a tournament, which is we'll get there at some point. Hopefully, knock on wood. All right. Speaking of another player that Temple was in the conversation for, it was still in the conversation for. He's a finalist. Monmouth's Miles Foster played at Monmouth last year. Temple in the Final Four with him. Illinois State, Ohio, and George Washington are the other 3. And listen, you want to talk about Temple getting some forwards, getting some size? This guy's got some size. 6'7", 230, average 12.5 points a game, a little over 6 rebounds a game. The only thing is Monmouth was kind of awful last year in their first year in the Colonial. I don't blame him for wanting to look elsewhere, but in comparison to the other 3 teams on this list, Illinois State, Ohio, George Washington, where do you see Temple's chances for Miles Foster?
Well, look, they're good. They need size. It's strictly on a need base. I really like their chances with this. Strictly on a need and a match here. They need a big. If this guy wants to move up from the CAA, which is one of the smallest conferences in America, move up to the AAC in the mid-major level, I say this is a pretty good move for him to be able to do so. Yeah, it's a real shame that Monmouth was that bad, because if you remember the year before, they actually lost to St. Peter's in the MAC championship game, and they had a good year. They had George Pappas, they had Shavar Reynolds from Seton Hall, they had Walker Miller, who's Wes Miller's brother, I believe, who was at North Carolina, who was basically like a walk-on, like a guy that seldom played. He transferred to Monmouth. So King Rice had a team that actually had a couple high major players on it. Unfortunately, they were somebody that fell to the Cinderella that was in Shaheen Holloway's St. Peter's Peacocks. And they lost all those guys. They all left. They all, graduated. Walker Miller, Shavar Reynolds, all those guys are out of eligibility. So they also moved to the CAA. Last year was their first year there, and it resulted in a very, very bad record. So you can't put that on Miles Foster, look at him differently because of that. They just lost a lot of guys. But look, Temple needs some deep. They need some ties inside. This isn't a guy that's going to shoot any threes. He's just a guy that's going to grab boards and do the dirty work inside. And for right now, you need more than just Emmanuel Akpomo. You can't play him 40 minutes a night after he was playing sporadically the last 2 years. So they need some size inside here. There's a guy that fits that bill. Couple good mid-major programs here. GW, I think, exceeded expectations last year in the A10. Ohio under Jeff Bowles has been pretty good. So there's some good programs here as well. But Temple needs size, and they need it badly. This could be a potential good match here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they just, like we've mentioned this episode and episodes before, they just need talent. They just need guys there. Definitely think this is someone who could fit the bill for that. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what Miles Foster picks. Obviously, like we do always, we will keep you updated on that once we know what his decision is. But Cope, I have a very interesting question for you. I think you're gonna like this. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about the LaSalle Explorers?
Yes, for the first
Because
time
we
all off
haven't.
season in a good way. Yes, please.
Yes.
Get
Let's
on
talk
me.
about the LaSalle Explorers, and let's talk about the LaSalle Explorers potentially bringing in players. They haven't done it yet.
Mm-mm.
It is May. We're recording this on May 4th. This is coming out May 5th. And they have not had one player. I mean, they've had, Deshaun Shepard go to the transfer portal, come back. But besides that, they haven't had anybody commit to them. And I'm not saying there is right now, but there's a chance. And he's a Swedish prospect in the class of 2023, Tunde Valberg Fasasi. I think I said that right, considering I practiced in my head a bunch and before the show. Now, I don't think either of us know a ton about him. If anyone had to, it would be you over me. But can you tell me anything about Mr. Fasasi and what his potential prospects are, what kind of player he is, and whatnot?
So look, have I watched any film of this guy? No, I really don't even know where to watch it. I have to look at YouTube to see where I can even find any film of this guy. But by all accounts of other people who have watched him, a big forward, can play a couple different positions, can handle the ball, can put it on the floor, can pass a little bit. Just as you kind of think these European guys can, who are used to playing team ball and not the AAU circuit kind of in America. So look, Dunphy's got a pretty good track record with some of these international guys. He earned some flack when he was at Temple. Look at Rokas Yotus this year. Pretty damn good. He got so much better as the year went on, and I think is a huge prospect for a breakout in the Atlantic 10. Brought in Jorge Sanchez Ramos as well. Brought in some foreign guys in his last class. So look, he's going back to that pipeline. Probably the road a little less traveled. They need guys. I think this guy, look, LaSalle, they need, not only do they need size, a big forward like him and a big wing that can play make a little bit by all accounts, I think is exactly what they need. They need another ball handler. They need some versatility. Somebody who can do a whole lot of different things. And Kunde fits that bill for sure. So a big guy who can pass, can take some ball handling duties off of a Khalil Brantley, off of a Jameer Brickus, because they really didn't have much last year. I think they needed some. They needed a unique guy like this, a change of pace guy, a guy who could create some matchup nightmares, could be a mismatch on the offensive end. I think this guy's going to fit that bill. They need to bring in guys. That's no secret. They tried to go after Keyshawn Kellman. They tried to go after Leo Oboyo, and none of that worked. And they've not struck out. I don't think they haven't really been in like the last two or three, or like been in the last couple options of somebody, but they have been reaching out to people. Just hasn't worked out. But they brought in Rokas last year, who was awesome. Some other international prospects that they seem to like. Why don't we keep going that way? I think Kunde, even if it's not this year, I think the player he could become and the idea that people think he could be a pretty damn good player in the A10 for LaSalle and give him something that they certainly don't have right now.
No, they do not. And listen, I don't know who else is, potentially going after Tunde. I know that LaSalle is hosting him, so getting him on campus is always a good sign. Maybe they can get him to sign the metaphorical, or I guess literal still, even in college, dotted lines, getting them to commit there. We'll see what happens. But having someone with that size is never a bad thing, especially if they don't really see a ton of that on LaSalle's roster recently. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, we hear some news about that soon. And hopefully we hear more LaSalle news soon. Because I feel like, we talked about a lot of Villanova because they've been very active. Temple's starting to get active again on the recruiting trail. Penn, we've talked about Jordan Dingle, Lucas Monroe, obviously transferring to Drexel. Haven't really talked about much about Drexel otherwise either.
Cool, but I mean,
But
we talked about them when they got the Big Five. Like, I
of
think
course,
that was a huge,
recruiting
huge
wise,
storyline. Yeah.
yeah, recruiting wise. But you know, we just and St. Joe's we talked about a lot too, honestly. But we have not talked about LaSalle because they just have not had an active offseason yet so far. We're a month after the national championship game now, so it's good that they're finally getting something going. But it's got to translate into a little more, and we'll see what happens. You got to trust Randolph. He's Mr. Big Thumb. So yeah, there's that. All right, one more quick thing. Actually, I did want to mention before this because before we got on here, it was announced that Jeremiah Williams, former Temple player, went to Iowa State, got hurt, was out the entire year, is in the transfer portal again. So Cope, this just kind of happened within the last few hours here of us recording, but any kind of raw reactions to that? Any places you might want to see him go?
I would like to see a list before I say that, just as I said with Jordan Dingle. Problem is Iowa State, he was gonna play there. He was. His defense is at least gonna get him on the floor. But they had a true freshman, Taman Lipsey, come in there. And he played very, very well this year. I think for a freshman, his ability to get to the basket, pass, defend a little bit, do everything you want to in a point guard, especially for a young guy like that, play the way he did. He unfortunately unseated Jeremiah Williams and took a spot and wasn't going to probably give that back to him as a young guy. So unfortunately, he's got it. It's nothing that can be blamed on him. The injury happens. The guy who steps in his place does admirably. They make the tournament. Besides Caleb Grill leaving and them kind of not being the same team toward the end of the year, then shooting like. You remember the Iowa State Pitt game? Like legitimately one of the worst shooting performances I've ever seen. They
I
just
do
couldn't make
remember.
anything. I think they shot 28% that game. It was horrible. Like it was seriously ridiculous. Like every time they made one, I was jumping up and down. Like they had one on a buzzer beater because they just weren't making anything. But regardless, besides the point, just go somewhere where you can play. If you got to transfer down, do it. I want to see a list because we are getting kind of later here, so spots are taken up. But certainly, a lot of schools are going to be reaching out to him. But I'd like to see a list, and we'll certainly be talking about him. But unfortunately, it was that injury, and then the guy that a young guy who was probably expecting to play very seldom, and Damon Lipsey came in, did a very, very good job for them. They end up having a good year. That's his spot now.
Yeah,
it is. And
it
unfortunately,
is.
Jeremiah Williams, if he wants to start somewhere, it's not going to be at Iowa State. Not his fault. It's not his fault. So we'll
That's
update you on a list. But very new. I mean, it was just today. So I'm sure that in the coming days we'll see a list, but so new that we don't have anything for you right now.
No, fortunately not. But I think you and I can both say it would be a welcome sight seeing him back on North Broad. I don't see it happening. He's too talented of a player, I think, but would be pretty cool. Don't think it'll happen, but we'll see. We'll see. All right. One final scheduling note. Some non-conference schedule here for the Penn Quakers. They are playing both Auburn and Houston in the non-conference schedule this upcoming year. So two extremely quality opponents, specifically Houston. Obviously, they've been a top 5 team in college basketball the last 3 years, I would say. Any reactions to this? I mean, I don't know if they're buy games. I'm assuming they're probably buy games because knowing how these things work in college basketball. Do you think there's a chance that Rothstein tweets epitome of brutality for any of these 2 games, Penn playing them? Not with Jordan Dingle. No.
Not
Yeah,
not
I don't
not
really know
without
why.
Jordan Dingle. But yeah, I can probably say with good confidence that Penn is probably being paid handsomely by these 2 schools to go down there, especially Auburn, an SEC school.
Yeah.
That just hired Hugh Freeze for a lot of money after firing Brian Harsin. So they got a lot of money, but these are 2 tough places to play. So especially Auburn, like these are 2 really tough places to play, and especially when you got to go to Houston and you got to play against them. And I know they're losing a lot of guys, but they're still going to be very good. Like this is still going to be a really, really good Houston team with a lot of good guards. And now they have LJ Cryer, and they still have Jamal Shed, and now they have Damian Dunn. And that's not including Terrence Arsenault, who was a top 100 recruit last year, and Emmanuel Sharp, who shot the 3 effectively. It's still going to be a good team, going down there in Houston. So They're getting paid handsomely. They're two very good teams. I know in the past, you look at Penn, they played West Virginia and they played Missouri this year. Years past, they played Arkansas and they played, I believe, Florida State. They've gone to play some big time schools and big time conferences and go on the road. I don't think they'll win any of these games though. And I think that Houston game for right now, if you're like, hey, Clark Slacker, you gotta do your thing against the guards and the athleticism and the length of Houston. I I
Good
don't
luck.
I don't see Mr. Rothstein tweeting out Houston loses a home bye game to Penn, the epitome of brutality. I don't forecast that, at least in the Houston game, and I think Auburn's going to put it together and be at least solid. So they're getting paid handsomely. Two tough places to go play. Two games that will get you ready for your Ivy League grind and your run to the Ivy League tournament. The two games that, as it stands now, without second leading scorer last year in D1 and the Conference Player of the Year, I don't think these are two games you can win.
No, I don't think so. I mean, if anyone, it would be Auburn.
Unfortunately,
If anyone, it would be Auburn. But yeah, I don't see it. But it's also, May. So we'll see what happens come
a lot can happen.
December, November, whenever the play. I don't know. I don't know if they had an official date on it yet. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But that's pretty much all we got for this one. There was actually some news this week and also some rumors too mixed in. Obviously, it's the off season. But any final thoughts here before we sign off?
No, hopefully we can update you with some more, and we can get these rosters finalized. And I want to have this drag into like June and July, and we're still talking about rumors here. But that deadline, it's coming up. I don't know if it already passed or it's coming up the end of this month. But you're like the deadline to enter the portal is coming up. So at one point we're gonna have a hard stop, and then we can only we'll only be talking about um you know we'll only be talking about guys committing, and we won't have to talk about guys leaving and decommitting. I'm seeing that Caleb Love with Dickinson out might enter the portal again. Like we won't have any
Really?
of that stuff. Yeah,
I did not
I
see that.
I think he went there under the idea that Hunter Dickinson was staying. So
Wow.
now that he's not there, I think he could leave.
Wow.
Something
Wouldn't
to
that
think
be
about.
something? I don't know where he would go exactly. I forget who was in the finalists for his
It
recruitment,
was
but
Indiana, and I think Missouri were up there. But
okay.
they've been filling spots. Nick Honor
Yeah.
said he was coming back. Missouri got Tamar Bates from Indiana to go there. So Missouri might be getting full if they're not already.
I could see
I
Indiana.
think Indiana has a spot.
Yeah.
There you go. You know what? I'll say if he leaves, I'll say Indiana. Why not? Then you get to play Michigan.
Yeah.
Then you get to maybe stick it to him 2 or 3 times
How about that?
during the year. And they need guards. They don't have Put Shafino. They got Xavier Johnson back, which is big. He got a medical hardship waiver because he broke his wrist or his hand or something like that. And he just passed like the 1/3 mark of games you could
Uh,
play before you had to before like it doesn't count or like it counts as a year of eligibility.
yeah.
He just passed it, so the NCAA did the right thing and they let him play another year. So
Good.
could give him a sidekick with no more Chafino. So I'm gonna say Indiana. If he leaves, I'm gonna say Indiana. We'll have a nice
Okay.
little rivalry. They'll have a rivalry with Michigan without ever having played a game there, or maybe even taking a class
Yeah. Hey, I mean, listen, as much as it sucks for Michigan, like I don't blame Caleb Love for potentially wanting to leave now that one of the best players in the country isn't going to be there. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Um, two things for me. One, the Rangers. I mean, they just went out so sad. I think the last time we recorded, they were up 2-0. I was feeling good. And then Akira Schmid came in. Uh, they failed to win game 3 that they had every opportunity to. They lost in overtime. Game 4 was kind of the same. Game 5, they didn't show up. Game 6, they dominated. Game 7 was the worst thing I think I've ever seen from a New York Rangers playoff team, and I've seen some heartbreaking stuff. So that was brutal. Knicks are also still doing pretty well. 1-1 with the Heat. Game 3 on Saturday. We'll see what happens. The other main thing I wanted to bring up though too is, I try to say something about this every year when I have a platform when I can, but May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's a very big thing, something I'm very passionate about. So not going to take too long on it, but mental health is an important thing, especially in men. I feel like men don't talk about it enough, though. It's I don't want to say growing. I don't think that's the proper term for it, but I think people are recognizing how important it is more often now than they have before. But just want to say, mental health is a real thing. Definitely make sure you're always checking in with yourself. Make sure you're okay. If you're not okay, go get help. It's okay. It's not an issue whatsoever. Many, many, many people do it. I've heard that therapy's like one of the best things ever to do. I've never done it myself. But definitely don't be afraid to be open with, whether it's professional or your friends or your family, whoever you're comfortable with. It is not a bad thing. It is not, feminine, because males, sometimes they get that thing where their toxic masculinity is a thing. Just make sure you're okay, because people want you here. We love you. So definitely make sure to check up with yourself, and use any resources you can to keep your mental health good. So I know it's probably a little too long there, but just wanted to say that because it's a very thing I'm passionate about. As I talked about on my previous podcast that I had, the Morello Show, a couple years. So yeah. And yeah, go next. So with that being said, make sure you guys subscribe on our YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us on social media at Big Five Pod, Twitter and Instagram. And obviously don't forget to not watch, can't do that. Listen to our audio only versions on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And of course, thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, we very much appreciate it. And yeah, we will see you next time.